CONCACAF Women's Futsal Competition just finished with Canada, surprising some as the victors. What did we learn? What does it mean? Well, let's talk about it. All right, guys, so welcome back to What Does It Mean? It's usually our match reaction here, and this is almost a tournament reaction here. The CONCACAF Women's Futsal Competition, the inaugural one, happening with the first CONCACAF Women's Futsal Competition happening later this year. CONCACAF hosted a competition for it. Now, here are the interesting facts that you need to know. There were 8 teams. Oh, I'm sorry. So guys, yeah, if you know, like me, we do usually Canada or African content. In this sense, we're going to just do fully CONCACAF. So if you like this type of content, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all the fun things. So when it comes to the competition, where 41 eligible nations were eligible, only 9 entered the final tournament, which meant we had teams. We had groups of 4 and 4, with one team ultimately dropping out. So the groups were Panama, Mexico, Guatemala, and Cuba. And then Group B was Costa Rica, Canada, United States, and Honduras. Guatemala were the hosts. And that's the important thing. The groups went as follows. You had in Group A, Panama winning the first matchup, with Mexico winning their matchup as well, 6-2 and 7-2 respectively. Mexico winning the next game 4-1 over Cuba, Panama 4-3 over Guatemala. And then Guatemala defeating Cuba 9-1 and Mexico 2-1 over Panama, which meant Mexico topped the group with 9 points. Panama in second, and Guatemala, unfortunately, with just 1 win, third, and Cuba in fourth. Group B, Costa Rica, United States, Canada, and Honduras were the groups. Costa Rica started the group off winning 3-2 over Canada, while the United States thrashed Honduras 7-0. In the second game, Canada beat Honduras 6-0, and United States and Costa Rica drew. Then in the final matchup, Costa Rica over Honduras, they were the beating stick of the group apparently. And then Canada with a resilient game, coming back to beat the United States 3-1, which meant the groups went, maybe surprising some, Costa Rica, then Canada in Group B, with Mexico and Panama in Group A, which meant your playoff spots were Canada versus Mexico and Panama versus Costa Rica. Panama, with a shock to some, beats Costa Rica in the semifinals 3-1, and then Canada in penalties defeats Mexico 4-4 after time, then in penalties 4-3, meaning that Canada and Panama would represent CONCACAF in the inaugural Women's FIFA World Cup of Futsal. And then in the final, Canada with a comfortable 8-2 win over the Panamanians in the final. Very interesting. I always have feelings when it comes to tournaments like this. I think the first thought I would have would be, I wish more teams could have been involved, and maybe after this you'll see more teams enter into these competitions. CONCACAF has 41 teams registered, and only 9 had teams that they entered to be part of this competition. Ultimately, only 8 participated, which means to me, there's so much room. Now, the problem with some sports is it's funding, right? You'll see that was one of my problems when they changed the format for the youth tournaments, and that's why I was saying just keep the format simple so that teams and federations can plan accordingly. But futsal is something that is I think it's a very good aspect. It's not quite beach soccer, but futsal, you see it translate well. I think if you look at North America, one of the players, especially for Canada, we look at Mo Farsi, who, though is now representing Algeria, we saw him come through the ranks. First, he played futsal for Canada. Then he got an opportunity to play in the CPL. Then from there, he was able to go and have an opportunity to play in the MLS, and from there now a stable part of his team in Columbus. But we saw him break in with futsal, right? And I think that is something that we could look at in terms of where this sport could go, where the sport could grow. Futsal is, I think, is a good way to work on dribbling, technique, that technical aspect of the game. And I think we shouldn't ignore it. But especially with different organizations, this could give more spotlight on the sport, which all you really do need is an indoor facility. It's not as cumbersome as, say, finding the grass or finding turf or places that you can go. And futsal is really part of that in the different parts of the world, right? It's part of that footballing infrastructure, that football and community where, you know, that pickup culture, so to speak. So I'm very much curious to see how this goes. I'm hoping it can start to grow here, and especially with a team like Canada, where I don't think many of us expected Canada to win. I think as a Canadian here, I did not see Canada coming over winning. I think if they could have made the semifinals, I would have been happy. And I mean, the run that Canada goes on, they lose to Costa Rica, they beat Honduras, then they beat the US, Mexico, and Panama in consecutive games. That's quite the gauntlet of teams to go through. After falling to Costa Rica 3-2. Right? Were they a little bit too dependent on the long ball? But hey, it got the job done. Now they'll have some time to be able to prepare and go through. But I think Canada, when he might give some of these other CONCACAF teams hope and say, hey, maybe, not to say that Canada was the lesser of the teams, but if a team like Canada is able to put together a team and then send and be able to be champions, what's stopping them from putting some players together, whether it is within their futsal infrastructure, or maybe it's find some technically gifted players that can play well on the hardwood there. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be curious to see what comes of it. But Canada is your inaugural CONCACAF Futsal W champions. Shout out to Esther Brassard, who is the Golden Boot winner with 8 goals in their 5 games. Indeed. Esther Brassard with that. Final rankings end there. Canada and Panama, they are headed towards that competition, which means also they will be joining, because we can see some of the other teams that are there. We're just waiting for the Asian teams, but so far they will be joining Morocco and Tanzania from CAF, Argentina, Brazil, and Colombia from CONMEBOL, Oceania, New Zealand, and from Europe, Italy, Poland, Portugal, and Spain. 3 teams left to be determined, but those are your teams that it's going to be taking place at the women's futsal competition from November 21st to December 7th in the Philippines of 2025. Guys, I hope you're paying attention to this, because I'm very much curious to see how this goes. Also, before I end that, shout out to the CSK for getting this together. Head coach Alexandra De Rocha. If I said it wrong, I'm sorry. Getting the team together. The gals played well, and I'm very much curious to see what they're able to do. Shout out to also Kaylee Mellenhorst, former U20 player on this team as well. Another example of players who can then translate that going through and playing well. You see different types of players can come in and excel in this. So curious to see what that looks like. And for the other teams, keep at it. Keep those programs together. Maybe it's another way for training, developing skills. But again, shout out to Alexandra De Rocha and see what they can do in the Philippines. And as always, thanks for being here. I'm going to stop talking right now.